the Jets got the first crack at Mike Vrabel. Now that he's out there, and I guess what the Browns reworded his consultant deal so he could start the process, and he just chit-chatted with the Jets right there. What's Vrabel's dance card going to look like, do you think, here, Tom?
I would fairly tell you, Rich, every team right now that has an opening, has a vacancy for a head coach, has done extensive research on Mike Vrabel. And there are teams that potentially are going to have head coaching vacancies that also have done work on Vrabel. Again, he's on that very short list of coaches who have had success in the NFL. Obviously, Mike's a very bright guy, knows the rules better than anybody else. He maxed out what that Titans team was. But the last year and a half or so did not go well. And there was a GM change, and they ended up hiring a guy that was not Vrabel's preferred pick for the position. And then there's, all the stuff where he flew to New England during the bye week and was sitting in Robert Kraft's luxury box and telling the crowd on the microphone that, hey, enjoy this because it's not like this everywhere, all while being employed as the head coach of the Titans. There were a lot of things environmentally that just got to the point that Amy Adams Strunk decided, I want to have a more collaborative type of environment with my next head coach. That's why Vrabel ended up being out in Tennessee. I know that he did a series of interviews with The Athletic that published today, in which a lot of his quotes are combating this idea that he's hard to work with. But he also said things in that story about like, hey, somebody's got to be in charge. And yeah, I'm going to give my opinions. That's not going to be for everyone. I would be very curious to know how that working relationship would go in New York with an owner in Woody Johnson who wants to have a lot of conversations about his team, as is his right as the owner. The Jets have not fulfilled the Rooney Rule yet. They did interview Ron Rivera earlier this week. You have to do 2 in-person interviews with external minority candidates before you're allowed to hire somebody. So this is not a, hey, don't let Vrabel out of the building. Which, by the way, the fact this is happening on the Friday while the Jets are on the practice field and Vrabel's in the building, I don't remember a lot of situations like that. But the rules now, Rich, as much as they've been set up to slow down the process, and all the coaches who are still employed by teams, everything the first 2 weeks has to be virtual. The exception to that rule is if you are out of work, if you have an expired contract, which by the Browns giving Vrabel a week head start here, he's able to interview in person. Well, Mike McCarthy's contract is up January 14th. He too can interview in person. Everybody else, all the currently employed coaching candidates, cannot interview in person until after the divisional playoff games. There's cadences with virtual interviews here, but it does give the guys who don't currently have a job or soon will on paper not have a job a leg up and an opportunity to make a first impression.
Well, I mean, it makes sense, despite the awkwardness, Tom. It makes sense that your Jets would do this on the Friday before their final game to utilize the advantage that Woody Johnson created way back in Week 6. Only to have that spark that he was looking for lead to 2 more wins. At least they should use that to their advantage. So, and at the same time, too, in the nonstop Cold War, if you will, between New York Jets and New England Patriots, to go ahead and maybe land Mike Vrabel if they can, that would be a fascinating plot twist because, as you were describing, Mike Vrabel's availability and even John Gruden's name caused my friend across the aisle, Chris Brockman, to start throwing his hands up in the air for the international symbol of what about us, except the fact that his Patriots currently have a head coach in Gerard Mayo. That is my long wind-up to this pitch. Is Gerard Mayo in trouble? Could the Crafts with Vrabel out there talking to the Jets and being out there, could they make a move, do you think, Tom?
Well, first of all, Mike Vrabel was out there last year, and there were, plenty of reports linking Vrabel to potentially going to New England. Again, he made an appearance during the season in the box of Robert Kraft and talking to the crowd. Those rumors will persist as long as Mike Vrabel is available as a head coaching candidate. I would say this. I have not been told anything definitive either way on Gerard Mayo. I would also say that it's important to remember this was not a decision made on a whim to name Mayo the head coach last season. This was something that had been years in the making. The grooming of Gerard Mayo and attempts behind the scenes to bring him along, the fact that contractually They put it into writing that he was going to be the next head coach, which allowed them to not have to go through several interviews to comply with the Rooney Rule. They could simply hire him flat out. Robert Kraft was very proud, if you go back to that introductory press conference in January, talking about how this was the first black head coach in Patriots history and the long history that Gerard Mayo had with the club, all of which is to say this has been a profoundly disappointing season for the Patriots. But if you remember that Bill Belichick, with much the same roster, had essentially the same record last year, and that's a guy who's arguably the greatest coach of all time, you certainly can make the argument that there's other things, namely upgrading the roster, spending money at the wide receiver position, which I know Elliott Wolf was trying to do last year, whether it was through trades to get an Ayuk or it was in free agency going after Calvin Ridley. They made attempts. They just weren't able to lure anybody. Maybe this time around, Drake May, looking as good as he has, might make your situation more attractive to outside free agents. You may still have to overpay to get guys in there. And then there's probably going to be tweaks to the coaching staff as well. We all lip read along, Rich, with the Crafts when they were up in the suite saying, I believe the quote, as read by the lips or from the lips, was the offensive play calling is terrible, which just on the surface, Alex Van Pelt's a very smart and capable guy. That's not a great sign for him when the owners are saying that. So perhaps you're thinking about, let's make changes to the offensive staff. Let's put better players around our bright young quarterback here, and let's take another shot at this in 2025. Again, I've not been told definitively one direction or another, but based on how Robert Kraft has operated, not just in recent weeks or the past year, but for several years now, I would certainly say it would qualify as a surprise if Gerard Mayo were not back.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.